Jake Morrison stood in the grand hall of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime, watching the alien delegates take their seats around the massive circular chamber. The human ambassador felt small among the towering crystalline beings and the floating gas clouds that made up the ancient ruling body of known space. His hands stayed steady as he held the formal document that had brought him here, but his mind raced with what this meeting could mean for all of humanity. Captain Lisa. Bradley walked beside him, wearing her crisp Earth Defense Fleet uniform. She had commanded 3 different starships in her career and seen combat against pirates in the outer systems, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The council chambers buzzed with energy fields and alien conversations in languages that sounded like music or static or sometimes both at once. Nexus Prime rose from the center of the chamber. The being stood 12 feet tall and looked like living crystal with light pulsing through its transparent body. When it spoke, its voice echoed from speakers placed around the room since its natural communication method would have shattered human eardrums. Ambassador Morrison of the species called Human U and your military representative have been summoned to answer charges of violation against the sacred laws that govern this galaxy, Nexus Prime announced. Your species has committed acts of aggressive expansion beyond approved parameters and has developed technologies that exceed the limits set for junior members of this council. Jake felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. He had expected this day would come eventually. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 30 years, but in that short time, they had built colonies on 40 different worlds and created a fleet that rivaled some of the older species. The Council had always been nervous about how quickly humans learned and adapted. What specific charges are being brought against humanity? Jake asked. His voice carried clearly through the chamber, despite the alien architecture that seemed designed to make visitors feel insignificant. A new voice answered from somewhere in the upper levels of the chamber. This one belonged to Counselor Zix, a creature that looked like a collection of floating metal spheres. Your species has established settlements on worlds without proper authorization from this council. You have shared advanced weapons technology with species that we have determined are not ready for such knowledge. Most serious of all, you have violated the technology limitation protocols by developing artificial intelligence systems that exceed approved parameters. Lisa stepped forward slightly. As a military officer, she understood the real meaning behind these charges. The Council was afraid of human progress and wanted to slow it down or stop it completely. The colonies we established were on uninhabited worlds in unclaimed space, she said. Our treaties with the Council give us the right to settle such worlds, as long as we register them within 1 standard year of establishment. The worlds you chose were designated as buffer zones, Nexus Prime replied. They were kept empty for strategic purposes that your species was not informed of because you lacked the clearance level to access such information. Jake exchanged a quick glance with Lisa. This was news to them. The Council had never mentioned buffer zones or restricted areas when humanity signed the membership agreements. It felt like the rules were being changed after the game had already started. Regarding the technology sharing accusations, Jake said, humanity has only provided defensive systems and medical aid to species that requested our help. The Council Charter specifically allows member species to offer humanitarian assistance to others. A sound like grinding metal came from one of the upper galleries. This was Overlord Ket speaking. The creature resembled a massive insect with too many eyes and spoke through vibrations in its carapace. The species you assisted were under our protection. They did not require outside help, and your interference has disrupted carefully maintained balances of power in their regions. Lisa felt anger building in her chest, but kept her voice level. With respect, Overlord Ket, some of those species were facing extinction from diseases or natural disasters. Our medical technology saved millions of lives. Lives that were meant to be lost according to natural selection. Zix responded coldly. Your species shows a disturbing tendency to interfere with the natural order of things." The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Jake could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes studying him and Lisa. He realized that this was not really about laws or regulations. The council feared humanity because humans changed things wherever they went. They solved problems that other species had given up on. They made friends with aliens that the council preferred to keep isolated and dependent. Nexus Prime spoke again, and its words carried the weight of absolute authority. "The Galactic Council hereby demands that humanity cease all expansion activities immediately. You will surrender control of your advanced fleet to council oversight. You will submit to permanent monitoring of all technological development. You have 7 standard days to comply with these demands." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. This was not a negotiation or a discussion of the charges. This was an ultimatum. "And if humanity refuses these demands," he asked, "then your species will be expelled from council space entirely. All trade agreements will be terminated. All diplomatic protections will be withdrawn. Earth and all human colonies will be placed under permanent quarantine," Nexus Prime declared. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake looked around the chamber and saw no sympathy in any of the alien faces. These beings had made their decision before the hearing even began. They wanted humanity broken and controlled, or they wanted humanity gone. Lisa leaned close to Jake and whispered, "They're not giving us a choice." Jake nodded slightly. The council had finally shown its true face, and humanity would have to decide how to respond. Dr. Alex Carter stood in the hidden laboratory aboard the research vessel New Horizon, studying the data that had taken him 5 years to collect. The room hummed with the quiet energy of advanced computers processing information that could change the fate of every species in the galaxy. Alex had dedicated his life to understanding alien biology, but what he had discovered went far beyond simple scientific research. The evidence spread across multiple screens showed a pattern that made his stomach turn. Species after species had risen to the edge of greatness, only to suddenly disappear from galactic records. The Council called them natural disasters or civil wars, but Alex had found the truth hidden in old databases and forgotten archives. Captain Nancy Cole entered the lab and looked over the displays with growing horror. She had commanded the New Horizon for 3 years and trusted Alex completely, but even she struggled to believe what the data revealed. "How many species are we talking about?" she asked. 17 confirmed extinctions in the past 1,000 years, Alex replied. "But I think the real number is much higher. The Council has been very careful about destroying records, but they missed some backup files on abandoned research stations." The largest screen showed a timeline of galactic history according to Council records. Every few decades, a promising young species would join the galactic community and begin making rapid advances in technology or culture. Then something would happen. War would break out on their homeworld, or a plague would sweep through their population, or their star would experience unusual solar activity. "The pattern is always the same," Alex continued. "A species develops faster than light travel or advanced artificial intelligence or some other breakthrough technology. The Council offers them membership and protection. Within 50 years, they either become completely dependent junior members or they vanish entirely." Nancy scrolled through the files showing detailed records of each disappeared civilization. The Helix Consortium had developed quantum computers that could solve problems in minutes that took other species years to work through. They had lasted 37 years after joining the Council before their homeworld suffered a massive asteroid impact that destroyed their civilization. The singing crystals of Harmony Prime had created art and music that moved other species to tears and had begun spreading their culture throughout their region of space. A virulent disease had wiped them out just as they started establishing colonies on other worlds. "What about the species that survived?" Nancy asked. Alex pulled up another set of files. "Look at the Zentari Empire. Before joining the Council, they had conquered 12 star systems and were expanding rapidly. Now they serve as glorified security, guards for Council facilities, and haven't developed new technology in 300 years. The pattern became clear as Alex showed file after file. Species that showed too much independence or creativity were either destroyed or broken down until they became useful tools for the Council. The surviving members of the galactic community had all learned to stay in their assigned roles and never challenge the established order. The Council doesn't protect younger species, Alex said quietly. It farms them. They let civilizations develop just enough to become useful, then they either harvest their resources and knowledge or eliminate them as threats. Nancy felt sick as she realized what this meant for humanity. We've been developing faster than any species in recorded history. Chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in 2 centuries. Exactly. Alex nodded. Most species take at least a millennium to make that kind of progress. Humanity has terrified the Council from the moment we achieved interstellar flight. At the door to the lab opened, and Admiral Kate Sullivan entered. She had received Alex's urgent message 3 hours ago and traveled across the system to see his findings. Kate commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled and had been suspicious of Council motives for years. "Show me everything," Kate said without preamble. Alex began walking her through the evidence. Hidden files from Council archives showed detailed plans for managing or eliminating species that showed too much promise. Humanity had been classified as a Category 5 threat, which was the highest level on their scale. "They've been preparing to move against us for 10 years, Alex explained. The ultimatum Ambassador Morrison received was just the final step in a process they started the day we joined the Council. Kate studied the tactical assessments that Alex had uncovered. The Council had been mapping human colonies and fleet positions. They had infiltrated Earth's communication networks and stolen copies of humanity's most advanced research. Worst of all, they had been secretly funding radical groups on Earth and the colonies to create internal conflict. They tried to start a civil war between Earth and the outer colonies 5 years ago, Kate realized. The terrorist attacks on the mining stations and the separatist movements that seemed to come out of nowhere. All Council operations, Alex confirmed. They wanted humanity weak and divided before they made their move. Nancy looked at the data showing Council military positions throughout human space. "They have us surrounded. Bases on asteroids near every major colony and hidden weapon platforms throughout our territory." But Alex had more to show them. His research had uncovered something else that gave him hope. The Council isn't as strong as they pretend to be. Their technology hasn't advanced significantly in 500 years. They've become dependent on subjugated species to do their innovation for them. Kate studied the technical specifications that Alex had gathered. Council ships were large and intimidating, but they relied on outdated power systems and weapons that hadn't been upgraded in centuries. Their computer systems were primitive compared to what humanity had developed. "They're trying to stop us before we become too powerful to control," Kate said. "But it might already be too late for them." Alex nodded. "Humanity has been developing in isolation for the most part. We've never shared our most advanced research with the Council, and they have no idea what we're really capable of." The 3 humans stood in the hidden laboratory surrounded by evidence of the Council's crimes and plans for humanity's destruction. But they also saw something else in the data. The Council was afraid because they knew they were losing control. For the first time in millennia, they faced a species that might be stronger than they were. "What do we do with this information?" Nancy asked. Kate looked at the evidence one more time, then made her decision. "We warn Earth and every human colony. The Council has made their choice, and now humanity has to make ours." Alex began copying all the files to secure storage devices. This information would reach every human leader and military commander within days. The galaxy was about to change in ways the Council never expected. Commander Ben Hayes floated in the zero-gravity docking bay of Kepler Station, watching the last shuttle approach through the viewing port. The station appeared abandoned to any casual observer, but beneath its damaged exterior lay one of humanity's most advanced facilities. Ben had spent 2 years preparing for this moment, and everything depended on the next few hours. Dr. Emma Rodriguez joined him at the viewing port as the shuttle docked with a soft, metallic clang. She had dedicated her career to studying alien cultures and languages, but more importantly, she had spent the last 5 years building relationships with species that the Council claimed to protect. Emma knew the truth about what the Council called protection. "Are you sure they'll come?" Ben asked as they watched the airlock cycle through its sequence. "They'll come," Emma replied with confidence. "They've been waiting for someone to offer them hope for longer than you can imagine." The first beings to emerge from the shuttle moved with the fluid grace of the Zephyrian people. They had once been masters of quantum physics and energy manipulation, but 3 centuries under Council protection had reduced them to simple farmers and craftsmen. Ambassador Zale looked older than his species normally lived, and his silver skin had dulled from years of malnutrition on the reservation world where his people were confined. Behind the Zephyrians came representatives of 5 other species. The Meridian Collective had sent Dr. Vex, whose people had once created biological marvels that could heal any disease or injury. The Council had forbidden them from practicing genetic medicine after they cured a plague that was supposed to eliminate a rival species. Ben led the group through corridors that hummed with hidden technology toward the central conference room. Kepler Station had been officially decommissioned 3 years ago after a mining accident, but in reality it served as the coordination center for humanity's most secret operations. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Ben said as they entered a room where holographic displays showed star maps and fleet positions throughout the galaxy. "What I'm about to show you must never leave this room unless you choose to join us." Ambassador Zale spoke first in accented but clear human language. "Commander Hayes, my people have heard rumors that humanity plans to resist the Council ultimatum. We hope these rumors are true." Emma activated the main display, which showed the current positions of every human colony and fleet asset. What shocked the alien visitors was the scope of what they saw. Humanity had established far more colonies than the Council knew about, and their fleet was 3 times larger than official reports indicated. "For the past 15 years, humanity has been preparing for this day," Ben explained. "We never trusted the Council completely, and we've been building redundant systems and hidden bases throughout unclaimed space." Dr. Vex stepped closer to examine the display with compound eyes that could see in spectrums invisible to humans. "These colonies are beyond Council surveillance range. How did you establish them without detection?" "Very carefully," Emma replied. "We disguised colonization ships as mining vessels and freight haulers. The colonies were built underground or inside asteroids, where they couldn't be easily spotted by long-range sensors. The display changed to show technical specifications for human ships and weapons." The alien representatives studied the data with growing amazement. Humanity had not only kept pace with Council technology, but had surpassed it in many areas. Ambassador Zale touched one of the holographic projections showing a human warship design. These vessels could fight Council ships on equal terms. "Better than equal terms," Ben said with quiet pride. "Human AI systems can react faster than organic pilots, and our weapons can adapt to enemy defenses in real time." But Ben knew that military strength alone wouldn't be enough. The Council controlled most of known space and had resources that humanity couldn't match in a direct confrontation. That's why he needed allies, and why this meeting was so important. "The Council has given humanity 7 days to surrender," Emma said. "Instead of surrendering, we're going to leave Council space entirely, but we don't want to leave alone." The alien representatives looked at each other with expressions that were difficult for humans to read. But Emma had studied their cultures long enough to recognize hope when she saw it. Dr. Vex spoke for the Meridian Collective. "You're offering us passage away from Council space. To go where?" Ben activated another display showing long-range sensor data from the galactic rim. Beyond the edge of known space are thousands of star systems that have never been explored. Worlds where species can develop according to their own nature without council interference. It would mean abandoning our home worlds, Ambassador Zale said slowly. Emma stepped forward. Your home worlds are prisons. The council has systematically destroyed your cultures and technologies to keep you dependent. On the worlds they've given, your people are dying slowly. The truth of her words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every species represented in the room had lost most of what made them unique. The Zephyrians, who once manipulated energy itself, now struggled to power basic machinery. The Meridians, who had eliminated disease from dozens of worlds, were forbidden from practicing medicine. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't become like the Council? Asked Ambassador Zale. Power corrupts even species with good intentions. Ben understood the question and had prepared for it. We're not asking anyone to follow humanity. We're proposing a confederation of equals where each species maintains complete independence. Humans will provide transportation and initial support, but after that, every species chooses its own path. Emma pulled up files showing detailed plans that had been years in the making. We've identified suitable worlds for each species based on your biological and cultural needs. The Zephyrians would receive 3 worlds with high-energy mineral deposits. The Meridians would get planets with diverse ecosystems, perfect for biological research. The alien representatives spent hours studying the proposals and asking questions about logistics and security. They were being offered something that hadn't existed in their lifetimes, a chance to be free. How many of our people could you transport? Dr. Vex asked. All of them if they choose to come, Ben replied. Humanity has been building transport ships disguised as cargo vessels for 5 years. We can evacuate entire populations, if necessary. Ambassador Zale looked around the room at his fellow representatives, then back at the humans. The Council will try to stop any mass evacuation. The Council will try, Emma agreed. But they'll fail. Their ships are too slow, and their commanders are too used to winning without fighting. Ben activated the final display showing humanity's real military strength. Hidden shipyards had been producing vessels using advanced human technology, while the Council believed Earth's fleet was small and outdated. When we leave Council space, we won't be running away, Ben said. We'll be moving toward something better. A part of the galaxy where species can reach their full potential without artificial limits. The representatives requested time to communicate with their leadership, but Emma could see in their faces that the decision had already been made. After centuries of oppression, they were being offered freedom, and they would take it regardless of the risks. Within hours, messages began arriving at Kepler Station from dozens of species throughout Council space. The word was spreading that humanity offered passage to liberty, and the response was overwhelming. President Carol Johnson stood at the podium in the United Earth Assembly Chamber, looking out at representatives from every human colony and territory. The emergency session had brought together leaders from across known space within 48 hours of Ambassador Morrison's return from the council chambers. The weight of the decision they faced pressed down on everyone in the room. General Frank Miller sat in the front row reviewing tactical reports on his tablet. As head of Earth's military forces, he had spent sleepless hours analyzing what a conflict with the Council would mean. The numbers were not encouraging from a traditional standpoint, but humanity had advantages that the Council didn't understand. Ladies and gentlemen, we face a choice that will determine the future of our species. President Johnson began. The Galactic Council has demanded our complete surrender, or they will expel us from known space and destroy our civilization. Senator Ryan Clark rose from his seat in the middle section of the chamber. He had been one of the strongest supporters of council membership when humanity first made contact 30 years ago. His voice carried the weight of someone whose fundamental beliefs had been shattered. Madam President, I have reviewed the evidence provided by Dr. Carter and his team. The Council is not the benevolent organization we believed it to be. They have systematically destroyed species that showed too much independence or creativity. We cannot submit to their demands without betraying everything that makes us human. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as representatives absorbed the implications. Many had read the classified files showing the Council's history of oppression and genocide, but hearing it stated openly in the Assembly made it real in a way that reports could not. General Miller stood to address the Assembly. From a military perspective, we face overwhelming odds in traditional terms. The Council has thousands of ships and controls most of known space. However, our technology has advanced beyond their understanding, and our fleet is larger than they realize. The main display activated showing comparative analyses of human and Council military capabilities. What surprised many representatives was how evenly matched the forces appeared to be, despite the Council's numerical advantage. Our ships are faster, more maneuverable, and equipped with adaptive artificial intelligence systems, Miller continued. Council vessels rely on outdated technology and tactics that haven't changed in centuries. In direct combat, we would have significant advantages. But President Johnson knew that military considerations were only part of the equation. General Miller, what are the long-term prospects if we choose to fight? Miller paused before answering. Even if we won every battle, we would eventually be worn down by attrition. The Council has access to resources from hundreds of worlds, while humanity is limited to what we can produce from 43 colonies. Representative Maria Santos from the Proxima Centauri system stood to speak. What about the option of compliance? Could we submit to Council demands and work for change from within their system? Dr. Carter, who had been invited to brief the Assembly on his findings, shook his head. The evidence shows that species who submit to Council control never regain their independence. They become tools for maintaining the Council's power, and their cultures slowly decay until they're shadows of what they once were. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered their options. Submit and face slow cultural death, or resist and risk immediate destruction. Neither choice offered any guarantee of survival. Senator Clark stood again. There is a third option that we haven't fully discussed. Complete withdrawal from Council space. President Johnson nodded. Admiral Sullivan has been developing evacuation plans for exactly this scenario. Admiral, would you brief the Assembly on the feasibility of mass exodus? Admiral Kate Sullivan moved to the podium with the confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. Humanity has been building hidden colonies and ship construction facilities beyond Council surveillance for 15 years. We have the capacity to evacuate every human from Council-controlled space within 6 months. The scale of what she described stunned many representatives. Charts and diagrams showed dozens of secret bases and hundreds of ships that officially didn't exist. Humanity had been preparing for independence longer than most people realized. Where would we go? Asked Representative Santos. Beyond the galactic rim, Sullivan replied. Long-range surveys have identified thousands of suitable star systems outside Council space, worlds where we could build a civilization according to our own values without external interference. But Representative Chen from the Luna colonies raised practical concerns. What about the species that want to come with us? Can we really evacuate entire alien civilizations? Sullivan smiled. 47 species have already requested passage out of Council space. Our transport capacity can handle their populations, as well as our own. The discussion continued for hours as representatives asked detailed questions about logistics resources and long-term survival prospects. The evacuation plan was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted, but the alternative was unacceptable. Representative Garcia from the Mars Terraforming Project stood to speak. I've seen what humans can accomplish when we're free to innovate and explore. The greatest achievements in our history happened when we broke free from limitations others tried to impose on us. Senator Clark looked around the chamber at his colleagues. The Council fears us because they know we represent something they can't control. change and progress, and the refusal to accept artificial limits. If we stay under their control, we'll lose the very qualities that make us human. President Johnson called for a preliminary vote to gauge the Assembly's sentiment. The result was overwhelming. 312 representatives voted for complete exodus, while only 18 voted for submission to Council demands. The decision is clear, President Johnson announced. Humanity will reject the Council ultimatum and withdraw from their space entirely. We'll take with us any species brave enough to seek true freedom. General Miller immediately began coordinating with Admiral Sullivan to implement evacuation procedures. Within hours, military commanders throughout human space received coded orders to begin Phase 1 of Operation Exodus. The representatives dispersed to return to their home colonies and begin the massive task of preparing entire worlds for evacuation. Some would struggle with leaving everything familiar behind, but most understood that they were choosing freedom over safety. President Johnson remained in the chamber after the session ended, looking out at the empty seats where humanity's leaders had just made the most important decision in their species' history. They were about to abandon everything they had built in Council space, but they were also about to discover what humans could accomplish without limitations. Admiral Sullivan joined her at the podium. Madam President, the evacuation ships are already moving into position. We'll be ready to begin mass transfers within 72 hours. And the Council, Johnson asked. They'll try to stop us, but it will be too late. By the time they realize the scope of what we're doing, we'll already be gone. The two women stood together in the silent chamber, knowing that humanity was about to embark on the greatest adventure in their species' history. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood before the assembled council delegates in the grand chamber for what he knew would be the last time. The crystalline forms of the ancient rulers pulsed with agitated energy as they waited for humanity's response to their ultimatum. Behind Morrison stood Ambassador Grace Patterson, who had arrived from Earth with the final decision of the United Earth Assembly. Nexus Prime rose from its central position, towering over the human representatives. Ambassador, Morrison, your species has had 7 standard days to consider our generous offer of continued membership under appropriate restrictions. What is humanity's answer? Morrison looked up at the alien being without showing any of the satisfaction he felt. The United Earth Assembly has carefully considered the Council's ultimatum. Humanity rejects your demands in their entirety. Her chamber erupted in sounds of shock and anger from the various alien delegates. Overlord Ket's carapace vibrated with rage, while Councillor Zix's metal spheres spun frantically around each other. They had expected defiance, but not outright rejection. You understand what this means? Nexus Prime said with cold menace. Humanity will be expelled from Council space immediately. All trade agreements are terminated. All diplomatic protections are withdrawn. Grace Patterson stepped forward. We understand perfectly, but there's something else you need to know. Humanity is withdrawing from Council space voluntarily, and we're not going alone. Before the Council could respond, the Chamber's communication systems activated with incoming messages from across known space. The first transmission came from the Zephyrian homeworld, where Ambassador Zale announced that his entire species was requesting passage on human vessels to territories beyond Council control. More messages flooded in from species after species. The Meridian Collective declared their independence from Council protection. The Singing Crystals broadcast their intention to join the human exodus. 47 different civilizations announced they were abandoning their homeworlds to seek freedom beyond the galactic rim. Nexus Prime's crystalline form blazed with internal light as the magnitude of what was happening became clear. This is impossible. These species are under our protection. They cannot simply leave. Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Actually, they can. The Council Charter specifically guarantees the right of self-determination. For all member species, you wrote those rules yourselves. Grace Patterson activated a portable holographic projector showing real-time images from across council space. Massive human transport ships were already at 40 different worlds, loading evacuees and their essential equipment. The evacuation had begun before the council meeting even started. "You've been planning this for years," Councilor Zix accused. "We've been planning this since the day we joined the council," Morrison replied. "Humanity has always valued freedom above security, and we've been preparing for the possibility that we might need to choose between them." On the display screens, the scope of the evacuation became apparent. Hundreds of ships moved between worlds in carefully coordinated patterns. Human vessels designed to look like simple cargo haulers revealed their true nature as massive population transports capable of carrying millions of beings. Overlord Ket spoke with barely controlled fury. "The Council will not allow this mass exodus. Our forces will intercept your ships and return these species to their proper places." Captain Steve Douglas appeared on the communication screen from the bridge of the human flagship Endeavor. His ship was already beyond the outer edge of council space, leading a convoy of refugee vessels toward uncharted territories. "Council forces are welcome to try," Douglas said calmly, "but they'll find that catching us is more difficult than they expect." The display showed tactical information that shocked the council delegates. Human ships were moving faster than council sensors could track them. Their adaptive AI systems allowed them to change course and speed in patterns that made interception nearly impossible. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came through the communication system from the Human Military Command Center. "Council fleet movements have been anticipated and countered. Your forces are positioned to intercept evacuation convoys that left 3 days ago through routes we abandoned yesterday." Grace Patterson smiled as she watched the expressions of the alien delegates. "While you were preparing to stop us from leaving, we were already gone." The communication screens now showed scenes from dozens of worlds where human and alien populations worked together to complete the largest evacuation in galactic history. Entire cities were being dismantled and loaded onto transport ships while human engineers helped alien civilizations preserve their most important cultural artifacts. "The Meridian research facilities are being relocated intact," Patterson explained. "The Zephyrian energy manipulation equipment is being moved to worlds where they can develop their technology without restrictions. Every species joining the Exodus will have the resources they need to rebuild and thrive." Nexus Prime attempted to maintain its authority. "These species cannot survive without council support. They lack the technology and resources for independent survival," Morrison laughed. "Council support has been the main thing preventing their survival. The Meridians were capable of eliminating disease from entire star systems before you forbade them from practicing medicine. The Zephyrians could power civilizations with clean energy before you restricted them to basic agriculture." The displays showed human engineers working alongside alien specialists to restore technologies that had been suppressed for centuries. Meridian doctors were already treating diseases that council regulations had forced them to ignore. Zephyrian energy specialists were building power systems more advanced than anything the council used. "You've destroyed the careful balance that has maintained galactic peace for millennia," Councilor Zix protested. Grace Patterson looked around the chamber at the alien delegates. "We've ended the oppression that you called peace. The species leaving with us aren't rebels or criminals. They're people who want the same thing humanity has always wanted: the freedom to grow and learn and become whatever they're capable of becoming." The final shock came when the displays showed the true size of the human fleet. Ships that had been disguised as mining vessels revealed advanced weapons systems. Cargo haulers transformed into warships equipped with technology the Council had never seen. The evacuation convoy was protected by military forces that could challenge the Council's entire fleet. "Your forces will not pursue us," Morrison said with quiet certainty, "because you know that in a direct confrontation you would lose." Nexus Prime's form dimmed as the reality of the situation settled over the Council. In one coordinated action, humanity had stripped away nearly half of the civilizations under Council control and revealed that their own military power was far greater than anyone had suspected. "This is not over," Nexus Prime declared. "The Council has resources and allies throughout the galaxy." Morrison gathered his documents and prepared to leave the chamber forever. "The Council has subjects who are too afraid to resist. That's not the same thing as having allies." Grace Patterson followed Morrison toward the exit but turned back for one final statement. "To any species still under Council control who want true freedom will be waiting beyond the rim. The door to liberty remains open." The two human ambassadors left the Council chamber as displays continued showing the massive exodus streaming toward unknown space. Behind them, the ancient rulers of the galaxy faced a crisis that their careful control could never have prepared them for. 3 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and Nexus Prime stood alone in the Council chamber that had once buzzed with the energy of galactic authority. The crystalline being's internal light had dimmed to barely visible flickers as reports continued arriving from across what remained of Council space. Each message brought worse news than the last. Counselor Zix floated into the chamber with metal spheres that moved sluggishly compared to their former dynamic patterns. The being that had once commanded respect throughout the galaxy now struggled to maintain basic functions as the infrastructure supporting the Council crumbled around them. "The trade routes through the Meridian sector have completely collapsed," Zix reported. "Without human shipping efficiency and Meridian biological expertise, the cargo transfer stations can't maintain operations." Nexus Prime absorbed this information without surprise. The economic foundation of Council power had depended on the productivity and innovation of species they had claimed to protect. With those species gone, the entire system was falling apart faster than anyone had predicted. "What about the outer colonies?" Nexus Prime asked. 17 more worlds have declared independence in the past month," Zix replied. "They're requesting passage to human space and threatening to stop resource shipments if we refuse." The irony was devastating. The Council had spent millennia carefully managing galactic civilization to maintain their control, but that same control had made them dependent on the very species they oppressed. Without human technological advancement and the creativity of other liberated species, the Council's empire was collapsing from within. Overlord Ket entered the chamber, moving with the painful slowness of advanced age. The insectoid being had lost several limbs in recent years, and the medical technology needed to regenerate them had left with the Meridian doctors. Council medical science had stagnated centuries ago when they began relying on subject species for innovation. "The surveillance networks in the Rim territories have gone dark," Ket reported. "Our monitoring stations lack the maintenance expertise that human engineers provided." Nexus Prime felt something approaching despair as the full scope of their miscalculation became clear. They had driven away the species that kept their civilization functioning while believing they could simply replace them with more compliant alternatives. But there were no alternatives that matched human adaptability or the specialized skills of the other escaped species. The chamber's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from long-range sensors. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. Human ships had been detected at the edge of known space, but these vessels showed technology signatures unlike anything in Council databases. "Show me the analysis," Nexus Prime commanded. The display revealed sensor readings that defied explanation. Human ships were generating energy signatures that exceeded theoretical maximums for their size. Their propulsion systems operated on principles that Council science couldn't identify. Most shocking of all, their communication arrays were sending instantaneous messages across galactic distances. "How is this possible?" Zix asked. 3 years isn't enough time to develop such advances." But Nexus Prime understood what they were seeing. Freed from council restrictions and working alongside dozens of other species, humanity had achieved technological breakthroughs that might have taken centuries under the old system. The Exodus had unleashed innovation on a scale the galaxy hadn't seen since the Council first established control. They're not bound by our technology limitation protocols anymore, Nexus Prime said quietly. And they're sharing knowledge freely with every species in their confederation. More reports arrived, showing the devastating progress of the human alliance. The Zephyrians had developed energy sources that could power entire star systems. The Meridians had created biological technologies that seemed like magic. Working together, the escaped species had solved problems that the Council had declared impossible. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Human Confederation, a technician announced. It's addressed to all Council members. The main display activated, showing Ambassador Jake Morrison standing in what appeared to be a thriving city on an unknown world. Behind him, representatives of dozens of species worked together on projects that demonstrated the incredible advancement of their society. To the Galactic Council and all species still under their control, Morrison began. 3 years ago, you gave humanity a choice between submission and exile. We chose freedom, and we've never regretted that decision. The transmission showed scenes from the Confederation worlds where human and alien children played together while their parents collaborated on technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Cities floated in the clouds of gas giants while underwater colonies thrived in alien oceans. The species that joined our exodus have not just survived but flourished beyond anything they achieved under Council protection, Morrison continued. We've eliminated poverty, disease, and war from our worlds while advancing our understanding of the universe at an unprecedented rate. Nexus Prime watched the images with growing horror. These weren't refugees struggling for survival, but members of a thriving civilization that had surpassed the Council in every measurable way. The society they had tried to prevent was becoming reality beyond their reach. We extend this invitation to any species still bound by Council restrictions, Morrison said. The door to freedom remains open. We welcome all who seek to discover their full potential without artificial limitations. The transmission ended, but its impact on the remaining Council members was immediate. Within hours, independence movements erupted on dozens of worlds as populations that had remained loyal for centuries suddenly saw an alternative to Council rule. They're systematically dismantling everything we built, Ket said with bitter resignation. No, Nexus Prime replied. They're revealing that what we built was never sustainable. We created an empire based on fear and oppression and convinced ourselves it was necessary for galactic stability. The final reports of the day brought news that the last major species under Council control were preparing to leave. The manufacturing, worlds that produced the goods keeping Council space functional, were shutting down operations and requesting human transport to Confederation territory. Zix's metal spheres barely moved as the being processed the implications. At current rates, we'll lose all subject species within 2 years. The Council will control nothing but empty worlds and obsolete technology. Nexus Prime dimmed further as the weight of total failure settled over the ancient being. They had possessed the greatest empire in galactic history, but had destroyed it through their own fears and limitations. The humans they had tried to control had shown that cooperation and freedom produced better results than oppression and stagnation. Send a message to the Human Confederation, Nexus Prime commanded. Request a meeting with their leadership. What kind of meeting? Zix asked. Nexus Prime looked around the empty chamber that had once held the power to shape civilizations. A negotiation for our surrender. The greatest irony was that the Council could have avoided this fate simply by treating humanity and other species as equals rather than threats. Their own policies had created the conditions for their downfall, and by the time they recognized their mistake, it was far too late to undo the damage. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, not with conquest or rebellion, but with the simple recognition that their way of governing had become obsolete. In trying to maintain control, they had lost everything that made control worth having. Outside the chamber, stars continued to shine on worlds where free peoples built the future that the council had tried to prevent.